It is hard to overstate how influential this guy that we're looking at now is, René Descartes. He was a French philosopher who was writing during the Enlightenment period, which was a movement in European history that can be characterized by certain features. But in order to understand what the hell is going on with the Enlightenment, you kind of need to understand the course of Western history and human inquiry up until that time. We start with the ancient world. The general picture that we give people when they're coming into philosophy is that philosophy began with the ancient Greeks, with the pre-Socratics. It was heavily influenced by Plato and Aristotle. But these thinkers were writing and coming up with philosophy in a particular place, in a particular time. Greek education up until this point had been mostly dominated by works of epic poetry, such as Homer, works of history by Hesiod and other figures. And they had a particular moral understanding of the universe. Okay? Something about what is right and wrong is woven into the fabric or the nature of reality, and we ought to align ourselves with those things. But they were also polytheistic. Okay? They believed in a lot of different gods and goddesses, and they saw natural phenomena as being divine or magical as well. Okay? So they basically thought that magic and the works of the gods and these spiritual powers were all around them, which is why they engaged in certain religious practices and sacrifices. All these different cults and religious groups started popping up, trying to worship and appease these things in order to try to access the higher mysteries, understanding what is going on, yada, yada, yada. Okay? So philosophy began during this time period, we think, at least in Western history. We're not talking about the East right now. This had a huge influence on medieval philosophy. The views that Plato formulated, his ethics, his metaphysics, his epistemology, would come to deeply influence the development of Christianity in the West. So these early Christian church fathers were influenced not only by Judaism, but also by Platonism and Aristotelianism, as we'll see. For a long time during the Middle Ages, Christian philosophy was actually dominated by the philosophy of Aristotle. This guy named Thomas Aquinas basically took Aristotle's philosophy and he used it to inform our understanding of Christianity, which led to the Catholic Church as we know it today and its philosophical understanding of Christian doctrine, Thomism. This was an empirical philosophy. So it thought that we figure out how the world works by using our senses. I'm not going to go into all the other ways that it differed from Platonism, but that was one of the key things. And so during this time in human history, the medieval world was dominated by Christianity and a Christian understanding of the world. Okay? Yahweh, a creator God, set all this in motion. He guides us during our lives. We should try to align ourselves with His will. There are spiritual powers contending with God, engaged in kind of spiritual warfare. And so they saw themselves, they saw society, they saw the world through this Christian lens. Okay? Still today, our society has been deeply informed by Christianity, so this hasn't gone away. But the next movement I would like to discuss is the Renaissance in European history, otherwise known as the Rebirth. This is a movement that started in Italy. These dates are kind of arbitrary. There are scholarly debates about when these different movements started in European history, but I'm giving them to you so that you have some kind of picture of what's going on. The Renaissance was characterized by we should say something like an interest. They were taking an interest again in the ancient works of Plato and Aristotle and Roman philosophers as well, like the Stoics. So it led to a renewed interest in ancient philosophy, and during this time there was a burgeoning of arts and literature. There was this romantic feel about it. Architecture was transformed. It's during this time that we get those beautiful buildings that you see in Europe based on Greek and Roman architecture. Music was influenced. Literature was influenced. All of that would change with the scientific revolution. We might say that the scientific revolution began with the publishing of Newton's Principia, which revolutionized Europe's understanding of physics and science and the movement of the planetary bodies. And it led to the development of new scientific fields. It led to a whole bunch of new scientific knowledge and theories and mathematics. And consequently, it would come to have a large influence on the development of European history and the history of the United States moving forward, insofar as, we come from what was going on in Europe. So all of that is informing this period in which Descartes is writing, the Enlightenment. See, those who were involved in the scientific revolution, they cited as their inspiration to try to figure out how the world worked, what the natural laws of the universe are. They cited God as their inspiration. They were still Christian in some sense, okay? And so they were trying to figure out, okay, why did God make things like this? How did God organize all of this stuff? Well, the Enlightenment was different. While Christianity would still come to have a huge influence on the development of Western history and philosophy, the Enlightenment was characterized by something different, which we might call the light of reason. Although it's overly simplistic, we might say that the Enlightenment thinkers were seeking to do philosophy differently, do the sciences differently. They were trying to think through all of this using reason. An overly simplistic description of what they were doing is they were trying to throw off the shackles of faith and dogma, and they were trying to figure out the rational underpinnings of everything. They weren't just going to take things on the basis of faith or tradition or religion anymore. Okay? But actually think through things themselves using reason. It's during the Enlightenment that we get the birth of all kinds of things that influenced the society that we have today. Social contract theory, rights, what we might call liberalism as a political ideology. Okay? And Descartes is writing during this time. We might say that the Enlightenment kind of starts with him. Okay? We are greatly indebted to the Enlightenment for the kinds of views that we have, for the way that we see the world, for the way that we do science and philosophy. Although we've departed from it a little bit, all of this stuff has influenced how we look at these things today, how we understand our place in the world, how we understand how we obtain knowledge of things and what we are as human beings. Okay? What's fair, what's just, so on and so forth. Descartes. incredibly influential guy writing during this Enlightenment period. He developed a whole new field that was kind of the science that he thought underpinned both mathematics and geometry, arithmetic and geometry, which he called analytic geometry. Some of what Descartes did led to the development of the calculus as we know it today. But he also wrote on physics. He wrote on metaphysics. He did work in optics. And he did work in what we might call philosophy. What we're going to look at in this class is his philosophy. Now, what was Descartes doing? Well, he was responding in large part to this Catholic Aristotelian way of doing philosophy that was very common during this time. Okay, there was still a strand, there was still a thread of philosophers and religious thinkers who were informed by Aristotle's views through Thomas Aquinas. And what Descartes did is he contributed largely to the move away from this Thomistic scholasticism, which is based on empiricism. It's based on, in part, Aristotle's metaphysics. Descartes was challenging that. See, because during his life, the Catholic Church had come to have a very impressive hold on the European world, and especially European education. Descartes was educated by the Jesuits, which was a particular group of Catholics that saw it as their mission to, well, determine what the education was going to be for future people, especially future Catholics. So, what Descartes got during his schooling was the typical Aristotelian education, where we look at different argumentative forms and how they're valid or not, Aristotelian metaphysics, this Aristotelian epistemology, that the way we figure out how the universe works is by using our senses, by experiencing things. Unfortunately, because the Catholic Church was so strong, Descartes didn't end up publishing a lot of his views until the heat kind of came off during this time in which those who were publishing things that were against what the Catholic Church was teaching were getting persecuted for that. Now, one of his major works is the Meditations, which is what we're going to look at in this class. There was a type of literature during this time period that was popular, which were meditations. And it means kind of what you think it means, okay? There were some religious thinkers, monks, religious educators who would publish these little pamphlets on how you can basically meditate on the Word of God and come to a better relationship with the Lord. So Descartes is kind of writing in this literary genre. But as we'll see, the way he develops his philosophy is completely different from the Aristotelian education that he received and which was very common during this time. So pay attention as we go through the meditations today, what the experience feels like for you, okay? Because Descartes, I believe, and one of my mentors, Roger Ariev, who is a rock star when it comes to early modern philosophy and Descartes, has characterized it this way. In his meditations, Descartes is literally trying to effect a conversion in his readers. He's trying to convert you to his philosophy, using rational argumentation, but also rhetoric. Okay? He's trying to move people away from this Thomistic, scholastic way of understanding the world and themselves and who we are and how we come to knowledge, to his view, which we might call looking backwards now on Descartes' views, Cartesianism. Cartesianism is going to be characterized by a few views, which we're going to explore here in a little bit. Dualism, the application of radical doubt, rationalism, etc. But I'm going to put the definitions of these on the board in a little bit. Now, what method is Descartes using in order to develop his philosophy, in order to overturn this very popular philosophy at the time? Well, it's basically this. He's going to start by utilizing systematic doubt. How often have you reflected on the things that you have been told about how the world works and what's true and what actually happened in history? How often do you actually reflect on the information that the news and all of these different images and institutions throw at you every day? Do you take them at face value? Most of us do, right? We don't do the research. We don't dig into it. We don't doubt it. But that's where Descartes is going to begin. And you should have seen that if you started the meditations before this morning. He's going to start by doubting everything. Okay? He's not going to take it on faith that what he's been told and how he's been educated is true, and is actually giving him a complete, robust picture of how the world works. And as you'll see, he's going to come to doubt pretty much everything. He's also going to engage in analysis. This word analysis comes from a Greek root, which means basically to break apart. He's going to take his concepts, beliefs, views, and he's going to break them apart into their different components and look at each component and see how they're related to one another. To see if his understanding is consistent, to see if he has good reasons for his beliefs, if he has evidence to come to the conclusions that he does. After he's broken this stuff apart and examined them all individually, he's going to engage in synthesis, which means he's going to put it back together correctly after making, the appropriate adjustments in his views. Finally, he engages in careful recapitulation of his arguments so you can understand how he came to the conclusion that he did, why he came to the conclusion that he did, so on and so forth. Okay, any questions so far? Giving you a very simplistic picture of everything that is influencing this work and the structure of it. Okay. Well, what did Descartes come up with? What did he do? Well, I've given you kind of a few gestures at an answer, but let's get a little bit more specific. What is he going to be arguing for in these meditations? Well, it's those views that I just told you about. Descartes is one of the fathers. He laid the foundations for what we might call modern dualism and modern rationalism. We've already seen dualism, right? What is dualism? Yes, Angel.
The belief in both like the physical mind and the soul, but he does say in his reading that like he sees the mind and soul as the same thing and he won't differentiate between them.
Right. It's basically the metaphysical view that there are two fundamental substances that make things up in the universe. So we looked at it specifically in the philosophy of mind. His view is going to be a little bit more general, metaphysically general, okay? He's going to say, look, there's stuff in the world that's made up of physical stuff. Whiteboards, markers, chairs, tables, shoes. This is made up of some physical substance that we call matter. But then our soul, or our mind, or our consciousness, it's not made up of this physical stuff called matter. It's not made up of these particles that we treat as points that are physical and have these physical properties. No, our mind is something different. So we can split up the things in the universe into these different categories. Okay? And these two substances, the physical and the mental, are distinct. They're not reducible to each other. They're different. He's putting forward this view, and he's arguing for this view in contrast to a different metaphysical view, which we might call monism. If dualism says two different substances make up the stuff in the universe, what do you think monism says? Angel?
Made of one.
Right. And there are different monistic philosophies. Some people think, as we've seen already, the universe is just made up of physical stuff. It's all physical. It's all natural. It's all made of matter. You're made of matter, and your mind is made of matter ultimately, and sweatshirts are made of matter, and atoms, and waves, and tables, and chairs, and elements. It's all made of matter. We might call that physicalism or materialism. But you can go the other direction with monism as well. You could think, like Bishop George Berkeley, everything is just made up of mental stuff. It's all minds and ideas. We saw this before, right, when we were looking at philosophy of mind. So Descartes is laying the foundations for this. He's also laying the foundations for what we're going to call rationalism. In contrast to empiricism, which says knowledge comes from the senses and experience, that is, how we come to understand the world, how we come to know what things are, is through our eyes, our ears, our nose, our mouth. Rationalism says no. Rationalism says how we come to knowledge actually is through logical reasoning. That's how we come to knowledge. And furthermore, rationalists like Descartes are going to say, this isn't just the way that we primarily come to knowledge, but such knowledge is more robust. It's more certain than the knowledge you get from your senses. And consequently, this knowledge that we come to through just analyzing things, logically thinking about things, this is the kind of knowledge that we should ultimately rely on because it's more robust. Okay? It is certain and indubitable. Okay, any questions about this? Keep these ideas in your mind as we go through the meditations these following weeks. Descartes is trying to build up these views, okay? He's trying to argue for these views. He's going to give us a lot of different arguments that we're going to try to figure out, that we're going to reason through, that we're going to put on the board, that we're going to interrogate and investigate. Has everybody written this stuff down? If not, that's okay. I'm going to upload the teaching notes anyway. So, here is my plan. We're not just going to sit here and you're just going to listen to me talk about this stuff. I had to give you this background information, but we're actually going to use our critical thinking skills in real time. All right? We're going to look at the meditations. We're going to read it together. We're going to try to figure out what Descartes is saying and why, and how he is justifying his arguments, and how he's formulating him, and what he is doing. Okay? So that's what we're going to turn to next. All right, let's start. Come on. Not going to stay for me, are you? All right, that's fine. Okay, I'm going to put the reading up on the board. I will start. Let's see, can I pull this down a little bit more? Nice. I will start, but then I'm going to ask some of you to read. I'm going to ask you to volunteer to read. Okay? We're starting at the very beginning of the meditations. Meditation 1. Of the things which may be brought within the sphere of the doubtful. The complete title of the work being Meditations on the First Philosophy. What is that? What do you think first philosophy might be? In which the existence of God and the distinction between mind and body are demonstrated. It's a lofty claim. Okay. It is now some years since I detected how many were the false beliefs that I had from my earliest youth admitted as true, and how doubtful was everything I had since constructed on this basis. And from that time I was convinced that I must once for all seriously undertake to rid myself of all the opinions which I had formerly accepted, and commence to build anew from the foundation, if I wanted to establish any firm and permanent structure in the sciences. Okay, so what's he doing in this work? Yes?
He's pretty much going to deconstruct what humanity were commonly accepted, and pretty much showing us that maybe we shouldn't always believe this. It's almost like a little kid when you're telling them, well, sand is real, tooth fairy is real, where they just accept that until when they get older, with new information, maybe more modern thinking, they tend to believe, then they'll know that that's not real.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like it, okay? But what he said here is pretty radical. I must seriously undertake to rid myself of all the opinions which I had formerly accepted and commence to build anew from the foundation. So what does he want to do? Well, he's going to interrogate all his beliefs. He's going to re-examine his beliefs. His body of knowledge, you might say. And he's going to try to reconstruct the foundations of his knowledge. He's going to try to reconstruct his entire set of knowledge from the ground up. Is that crazy or what? Have you ever tried to do that? How much work do you think it would require?
Already know your prejudices from everything.
Yeah. It sounds kind of crazy, right? Okay, well, let's see. But as this enterprise appeared to be a very great one, I waited until I had attained an age so mature that I could not hope that at any later date I should be better fitted to execute my design. This reason caused me to delay so long that I should feel that I was doing wrong were I to occupy in deliberation the time that yet remains to me for action. Today, then, since very opportunely for the plan I have in view, I have delivered my mind from every care and am happily agitated by no passions, and since I have procured for myself an assured leisure and a peaceable retirement, I shall at last seriously and freely address myself to the general upheaval of all my former opinions. Okay. Could I get someone to start the next paragraph?
I can start.
Okay. Yeah.
Now for this object, it is not necessary that I should show that all of these are false. I shall perhaps never arrive at this end. But inasmuch as reason already persuades me that I ought no less carefully to withhold my assent from matters which are not entirely certain and indubitable than from those which appear to me manifestly to be false. If I am able to find in each one some reason to doubt, this will suffice to justify my rejecting the whole.
Okay, good. Stop there. Okay, Descartes has said some important things here. Okay, his goal in this piece, again, is to re-examine and reconstruct his foundations for knowledge. Now, what is he going to do that? Well, I've kind of given it away a little bit. He's going to utilize reason to examine his beliefs and his knowledge, and he's going to use that to build his knowledge back up from the foundations. But what else has he said here in just these 2 sentences? What does he start by saying?
If I can find reason to doubt, then I will justify rejecting the whole.
Okay. So what is he going to use to aid in this endeavor?
Well, he uses objections and replies later on to face anything that can be reasonable doubt.
Right. That's true. He's going to use doubt. And if he doubts something, what is he going to conclude? If he comes to doubt about a certain belief.
That he's got to throw it all out. Like, it's not useful to him. And he's looking for a sort of, like, absolute belief that rationalism he thinks will find. Because, I don't know, he says later on, if he's deceived by his senses once, he can't trust them.
Right. Think about it. If you're building a house, you want a stable foundation, right? You want something that's rock hard, that's guaranteed. So if you're going to reconstruct your knowledge from the ground up, are you going to build your knowledge on shifting, doubtful, strange ideas? Of course not. So Descartes is setting the bar really high for himself. He says, if I am able to find in each one some reason to doubt, this will suffice to justify my rejecting the whole. He's going to utilize what we might call an epistemic infallibilist position. What does knowledge require? True knowledge? What is a good foundation for our beliefs, our set of knowledge require? Certainty. Certainty. So if he has reason to doubt something, he's not going to take it that he knows it. Okay? he finds any reason to doubt one of his beliefs, he's going to put it aside. He's going to say, well, I found a reason to doubt it. I'm not certain about this thing. So I'm not going to take it as knowledge. I'm not going to build my set of knowledge, my foundation, unless it is certain and indubitable. Okay. Could I get someone to start with and for that end? Sawyer, you want to give it a shot?
Yeah, sure. And for that end, I will not be
Yeah, requisite.
I will not be requisite that I should examine each in particular, which would be an endless undertaking for owing the fact that the destruction of the foundations
Good.
Of necessity brings with it the downfall of the rest of the edifice. I shall only in the first place attack those principles upon which all of my former opinions rested.
Good, stop. Is Descartes going to examine each one of his beliefs in particular? Is he going to go through his whole set of beliefs and analyze all of them and question all of them? No? Okay, what's he going to do?
Attack the principles of the beliefs.
He's going to attack the foundations that his beliefs are built on. Yes. He's not going to go through all of his beliefs. He says that would be an endless undertaking. No. What do you want to do if you want to destroy a building? Well, just destroy the foundation. It'll come down, right? So he's going to look at the foundations of his beliefs, his first principles. Okay? Those things on which all his other views and beliefs are resting on. Because if he can find something wrong with the first principles that all of his beliefs are built on, if you can find something wrong with the first principles, all of it will come crashing down. So he's not going to go through all of his beliefs individually. He's going to go to first principles. Those things on which all of his views up until this point rest upon. Okay, next little paragraph. Who wants to read that?
All that up to the present time I have accepted as most true and certain. I have learned either from the senses or through the senses. But it is sometimes proven to me that these senses are deceptive, and it is wiser not to trust entirely to anything by which we have once been deceived.
Okay, so what were his beliefs built on up until this point?
Pretty much the senses of touch, smell, what you can physically see.
Right. He's built his beliefs and his views, he's realized, on what he has experienced. What his nose has told him about the world, what his eyes have told him about the world, what his ears have told him about the world. It doesn't seem unreasonable, right? When you're driving a car, how do you know somebody's walking right in front of you at the crosswalk? Well, you might think, because I see them, Professor Gunner, duh. I see things, I hear things, right? I feel things. Is there a table in front of you right here? Are you sitting at a desk? You're going to say, yeah, duh. How do I know? Well, I feel it, right? I see it, I sense it. Now, what problem does Descartes find with this? He's built his beliefs upon the senses, but what? On what the senses have given him?
They can be deceiving.
Yeah. How can they be deceiving? Yeah.
The dream argument.
Yeah, we're going to get there. You're right. Just think about it like this. Have you ever heard of a mirage? What's a mirage?
It's like a hallucination.
Yeah, you might say it's a hallucination. It's like an illusion, right? People think they see the oasis in the desert, and then when they get there, they realize, no, it was just the heat waves over the sand that made them think there was something there. You feel a vibration in your pocket. And so you're like, oh yeah, I got a notification from that guy. So you check your phone. No, you didn't get a notification. You ever have that? You ever hear something at night in your dorm and you think somebody broke in and you're freaked out? And then you get up, you're scared, looking around, and there's nothing there. The senses, Descartes thinks, have deceived us in the past. They tell us, they're trying to tell us, we think, how the world works, what's going on out there, but they're not always dependable. And so he's found a reason to doubt the senses. So you might think he's going to toss the senses out as a reliable way to come to knowledge about the world. But what's he going to do here? Well, he's going to respond to this point he just raised. I'll read this one. But it may be he's imagining somebody retorting, okay, or responding to him. But it may be that although the senses sometimes deceive us, Descartes, concerning things which are hardly perceptible or very far away, there are yet many others to be met with as to which we cannot reasonably have any doubt, although we recognize them by their means. For example, there is the fact that I am here, seated by the fire, attired in a dressing gown, having this paper in my hands and other similar matters. And how could I deny that these hands and this body are mine? Were it not perhaps that I compare myself to certain persons devoid of sense, whose cerebella are so troubled and clouded by the violent vapors of black bile, that they constantly assure us that they think they are kings when they are actually quite poor, or that they are clothed in purple when they are really without clothes whatsoever, or who imagine that they have an earthenware head, a jar for a head, or are nothing but pumpkins or are made of glass. But these people are mad, and I should not be any the less insane were I to follow examples so extravagant. So how does he respond to this? Descartes is thinking through his beliefs. He's trying to, build his knowledge from the ground up. He has just come to the realization that the senses are deceiving, but he's playing devil's advocate with himself. How does he respond to that?
He's like, well, I'd kind of be insane if I were to say that I'm not sitting in this chair right now, or that I'm a rich man, or that, he's just like, I would kind of be insane if I just started basing things on not my senses entirely.
Are you in class right now? Do you have clothes on right now? Is Professor Gunner doing goofy stuff in front of you? Well, depending on what you think of goofy. Right, you're here. You're sitting in the classroom. We're thinking through this. We're talking about this. Duh, right? Do any of you doubt that? Wouldn't it be really weird if you did? I come over to you, we strike up a conversation, and you say to me, Professor Gunner, I actually think right now I am in a simulated video game designed by Japanese developers. I'm a test subject for this new game. That's what I think is actually going on. This isn't real life. I'm in a game right now. Doesn't that sound like a crazy thing to say? No, you're in the world, right? You have a body, you're feeling things, you're seeing stuff. So, maybe this is just a crazy thing to say. I mean, look, maybe the senses deceive us when it comes to things that, are really small or are very far away. But aren't they normally reliable? Wouldn't we be insane not to rely on them? It's obvious that we're here in this room, that we're hanging out, that we're working through philosophy, right? Well, Descartes is going to respond to this objection that he just raised for himself. All right, could someone read this paragraph?
At the same time, I must remember that I am a man, and that consequently I am in the habit of sleeping, and in my dreams representing to myself the same things, or sometimes even less probable things, than do those who are insane in their waking moments. How often has it happened to me that in the night I dreamt that I found myself in this particular place, that I was dressed and seated near the fire, whilst in reality I was lying undressed in my bed. At this moment, it does indeed seem to me that it is with eyes awake that I am looking at this paper, that this head which I move on is not asleep, that it is deliberately and of set purpose that I extend my hand and perceive it. What happens in sleep does not appear so clear nor so distinct as does all this, but in thinking over this, I remind myself that on many occasions I have in sleep been deceived by similar illusions, and in dwelling carefully on this reflection, I see so manifestly that there are no certain indications by which we may clearly distinguish wakefulness from sleep, that I am lost in astonishment. And my astonishment is so that it is almost capable of persuading me that I now dream.
Good, thank you. Okay, so how does he respond to this? I mean, duh. I'm sitting next to the fire right now. I'm doing my meditation. I have my dressing gown on. I'm writing on this paper. It would be stupid to doubt that. Right? How does he respond to this? Annabelle.
He brings up there's a chance that we could be sleeping because the act of being conscious and also dreaming, it's kind of hard to differentiate other than when you finally wake up, you realize you were dreaming. So he kind of questions what if we all are doing just that and being confused by the illusion of dreams.
Right. It seems obvious that we're in the classroom right now, that I'm holding my water bottle, that you're holding your pen, that you're writing notes, that you're hearing my voice, that you're actually on USF's campus. But how do you know you're actually awake? Couldn't this all be a very vivid dream? What do you think?
You can just pinch yourself.
Is that a proof that you're not dreaming? Have you ever had an extremely vivid dream? Or have you ever had a dream like this where you wake up in your dream and you're like, oh, I'm awake. Okay, I got to go do my shit. And you were sleeping in your dream, you woke up in your dream, you think you're in reality, you're not actually in reality, you wake up again. And you're in your bedroom and you're like, oh damn, I was dreaming. Have you ever had a vivid dream like that? I think we all have. And so he says, I must remember that I'm a man, I'm in the habit of sleeping, and my dreams can be really vivid. I could just be dreaming that I'm sitting by the fire right now. How does he respond to this? Well, he comes to a startling realization. There don't seem to be any way that I could prove to myself that I'm actually awake right now. Are there any proofs you could give yourself that would show without a doubt you're not actually in your bed right now, dreaming all of this? Remember, he's looking for something with complete certainty, indubitable. He's thinking, no, there's no proof I can come up with that I'm actually awake right now, doing what I think I'm doing. Okay, well, he's going to respond to this. I'll just read this first sentence. Somebody can take off. Now let us assume that we are asleep and that all of these particulars... Who wants to volunteer? Okay, go for it.
E.g. that we open our eyes, shake our head, extend our hands, and so on, are but false delusions. And let us reflect that possibly neither our hands nor our whole body are such as they appear to us to be. At the same time, we must at least confess that the things which are represented to us in sleep are like painted representations, which can only have been formed as the counterparts of something real and true. And that in this way, those general things at least, eyes, a hand, a head, and a whole body, are not imaginary things, but things really existent. For as a matter of fact, painters, and even when they study with the greatest skill to represent sirens and
Satyrs
by forms, and most strange and extraordinary, can give them the natures which are entirely new, but merely make a certain medley of the members of a different animal. Or if their imagination is extravagant enough to invent something so novel that nothing similar has ever before been seen, and that then their work represents a thing purely fictitious and absolutely fake, it is certain all the same that the colors of which this is composed are necessary and real.
Okay, good. Okay, so what is he going to presume? Well, that he is asleep. He's going to say, okay, maybe I am asleep. I'm just going to assume I'm asleep right now. What does he end up concluding? Let's say you are asleep right now. You're actually in your bed. You're just dreaming of being in Professor Gunner's class. Let's say that you're asleep. All of the things that you're seeing around you right now, tables, chairs, walls, clocks, are they merely fictions, hallucinations that aren't based on anything in reality?
Pretty much that, at least if we're assuming that we're dreaming, some of these must hold some truth, because like what you said like near the end, where pretty much we're using the same colors, we all are using similar hands, and etc.
Yeah, presumably the stuff of our dreams are based on things that are actually real, right? Like you have a dream of a dragon, right? Like chasing you down or something. Well, you didn't just randomly come up with that. It's because maybe you've seen a dragon at one point when you were awake in a book, or you've read about it, or you had a conversation about mythological creatures with your friend. So Descartes' thinking, okay, well, let's just assume I am asleep, I am dreaming. Still, the stuff of my dreams must be based on things that are actually real in reality. Otherwise, where else would he get the ideas for things to dream about? Can you have a dream about hands if you've never, seen or interacted with or talked about hands? Can you have dreams about desks and tables and chairs if, you've never seen or heard or talked about them? Doesn't seem like it. Our brain just doesn't come up with completely new stuff, right? Even in your dreams, maybe the weird monsters that are chasing you, they're still made of elements that you think are actually real, right? Because you've had experiences with these things. You've interacted with these things. So he's thinking, okay, the images that I'm having right now in my dream, these representations, they're based on things that I think I can say are real. Surely real. Right? The things which are represented to us in sleep are like painted representations, which can only have been formed as the counterparts of something real and true. These things are not imaginary things, but they're based on things that must be real. Otherwise, where would you get the ideas for your dreams from? Unless there was a real reality with things in it that are a certain way that gave you ideas. Okay? I will read this part. And for the same reason, he goes on, although these general things, such as a body, eyes, a head, hands, and the like, may be imaginary, we are bound at the same time to confess that there are at least some other objects, yet more simple and universal, which are real and true. And of these, just in the same way as with certain colors, all these images of things which dwell in our thoughts, whether real, true and real, or false and fantastic, are formed. To such a class of things pertains corporeal nature in general, that things have bodies, and extension in space, their shape, their quantity or magnitude and number, as well as the place in which they are, the time which measures their duration, and so on. So even if we imagine all the stuff of our dreams are just weird hallucinations or illusions, and they're not based on anything real, let's assume they're not based on anything real, still we would have to say the stuff of our dreams are based on more general, simpler, true and real things. Have you ever had a dream about something that didn't have a shape? Is it possible to imagine something that doesn't have a shape? Or if you see something in your dream like a soccer ball, still that soccer ball is extended in your dream space. It takes up space. Or how many soccer balls there are in your dream. Presumably there's a fact of the matter, right, about how many soccer balls there are there. There's not an indeterminate number that's like fuzzy and weird. So it seems that even if we imagine the stuff of our dreams is all illusion and hallucination, there are simpler, more general things that they are based on and that they have to adhere to. Maybe. Okay, we're going to go to this paragraph next. Who wants to read this one? Go for it.
That is possibly why our reasoning is not unjust when we conclude from this that physics is astronomy, medicine, and all other sciences, which have as their end consideration of composites, are very dubious and uncertain. That arithmetic, geometry, and other sciences of that kind only treat the things that are very simple and very general without taking the great trouble of ascertaining whether they're actually existent or not, contain some measure of certainty and an element of indubitable. Whether I'm awake or asleep, 2 and 3 together are always form 5, and that the square can never have more than 4 sides. It does not seem possible that truth so clear and apparent can be suspected of any falsity or uncertainty.
Okay, great. Okay, so even if the stuff of his dreams aren't based on anything real, what must be real, Descartes thinks? What is certain? What is indubitable? Math. Is it possible that the math that we have and know is just a complete hallucination and has no bearing to reality? What do you think? Or do you, like a lot of others, think, like, if anything is true, it's like math, right? 2 and 2 together always make 4, right? 5 and 10 always make 15. How many sides does a triangle have? Shout it out.
3.
Can a triangle have less than 3 or more than 3 sides? No, right? It seems like things like arithmetic and geometry, these are real. We can know that stuff without any doubts. We can depend on that stuff, right? For whether I am awake or asleep, 2 and 3 together always form 5, and the square can never have more than 4 sides. And it does not seem possible that truths like these, so clear and apparent, can be suspected of any falsity or uncertainty. But there's always going to be a but, okay? Nevertheless, I have long had fixed in my mind the belief that an all-powerful God existed, by whom I have been created such as I am. So Descartes is saying, I've always thought God existed. Okay, I've had faith in God. But how do I know that he has not brought it to pass? That there is no earth, no heaven, no extended bodies in space, no magnitude, no place, and that nevertheless, I possess the perceptions of all these things, and that they seem to me to exist just exactly as I now see them. And besides, as I sometimes imagine that others deceive themselves in the things which they think they know best, how do I know that I am not deceived every time that I add 2 and 3, or count the sides of a square, or judge of things yet simpler, if anything simpler can be imagined? But possibly, God has not desired for me to be deceived, blah, blah, blah. What is his response to this? We can depend on mathematics, geometry. We know that that's true and certain. What could be the case?
Every time he's counting the sides of a square, he could be being deceived by that. It's not necessarily a given.
Yeah, how do you know when we're doing math, we're doing it right every time? Maybe we could be wrong every time we try to do math. We don't realize it. People are confident about all sorts of things. In fact, a lot of people are super confident about things they think they know best, and they know most correctly, and in fact, they're wrong. Just because I'm confident that math is dependable, that doesn't mean that it is. Okay? Okay. He goes through this long thing about God. He responds to this by saying, well, if God does exist, God wouldn't let me be deceived every time I do math. That doesn't make any sense. That would be stupid. But he's going to make the job harder for himself. So what does he say? I shall then suppose not that God, who is supremely good and the fountain of truth, but some evil genius, not less powerful than deceitful, has employed his whole energies in deceiving me. He's going to presume instead, not that there's an all-powerful, all-just, good God who watches over him, but instead, what if there existed an all-powerful God that was evil, or an all-powerful demon that was evil, whose sole goal was to deceive me? Could I know anything then? Could I come to any stable foundation for my knowledge if that were the case? This is what he's setting out at the end of this meditation. Some evil genius, let's assume this, has employed his whole energies in deceiving me. I shall consider that the heavens, the earth, colors, figures, sound, and all other external things are not but the illusions and dreams of which this genius has availed himself in order to lay traps for my confidence. I shall consider myself as actually having no hands, no eyes, no flesh, no blood, nor any senses, yet falsely believing myself to possess these things. I shall remain obstinately attached to this idea. And if by this means it is not in my power to arrive at the knowledge of any truth, I may at least do what is in my power, suspend my judgment, and with firm purpose avoid giving credence to any false thing, or being imposed upon by this arch-deceiver, however powerful and deceptive he may be. So, he's going to use this thought experiment. He's going to presume that there is an evil, all-powerful thing whose sole goal is to deceive him. Why? Well, because if he can find something that he knows with certainty, despite presuming this, what has he done? Found something he could depend on for his knowledge moving forward, something certain and indubitable? Yes, maybe. So he's going to use this thought experiment to see if there's anything he can know with complete certainty. Because if he makes his job harder for himself like this, and he comes to something, he knows it can be a sure and stable foundation. Again, he's making his job as hard for himself as he can to find the most stable foundation, if one exists, if there is one for his knowledge moving forward. Okay, any questions? Concerns? Go bug your friends and ask them if they actually know and can prove they're awake right now. I will see you all on Thursday.